Morning to you. I was absolutely petrified on the first day of the event. We had done so much work building up to the day. We were so anxious. We were so nervous that we were going to, just make a mistake because we knew that the entire world was watching South Africa. We knew that the entire world was keeping a very close eye on us. And the last thing that we wanted to do was, go on and not do it justice. And I remember that the morning of, I got sent out to the team hotel of Mexico for that very first match. They were staying out at a place called Tabaya, Botswana in the south of Johannesburg. And I was stationed outside their team hotel. I was told to get there at 6 o'clock in the morning to start filing for breakfast. I got there probably about 5:30. I wasn't allowed to actually go onto the premises, understandably. And I landed up spending the entire morning outside that hotel waiting for Mexico to finish their breakfast, to finish their lunch, and eventually come through to the FNB stadium. I then tailed the bus on the way back to the stadium and just continued trying to deliver some form of ongoing coverage, despite the team being locked away in the team hotel. But that was kind of how it summed up the entire tournament, because as South African journalists, as international journalists, of which thousands had come to South Africa, it was our job to try and just tell people the stories of what was happening in this World Cup and to try and show people that, the disbelief that they had, the concern that they had around Africa, around South Africa hosting an event was all absolute nonsense. And as we got closer and closer to kickoff, you really could feel the anxiety from everybody just waiting to see Bafana get onto that pitch.
Marc, you mentioned the fact that thousands of media professionals around the world, around the globe, descended on South Africa and, of course, particularly to Johannesburg where that first match happened. But from a media perspective, how crucial was it to do justice to such a fantastic and momentous occasion in South African history?
Oh, we were under such pressure to do so. And in fact, it was one of the comments that Danny O'Dan spoke about just this week when he sat down with our colleague Manenthe Tlele. We'll have more from that Danny O'Dan interview later today. But Danny made that exact point, saying that as a South African, we were being judged and no one believed that we could put on a proper World Cup. So not only did we have to do a normal World Cup or a good World Cup, it had to be an outstanding World Cup, only to prove to every single critic around the world that Africa had the ability to host an equal, if not even better, tournament than what Europe had done. And what I found so amazing is that years down the line now, we've had Brazil in 2014, we've had Russia in 2018, we're now going to Qatar in 2022, and somehow still people are talking about South Africa in 2010. So if we can still talk about this event 10 years later as arguably the greatest World Cup of all time, I think it shows you just how hard South Africa worked, how hard the LOC worked, and how well behaved the country was at the time to put on the most incredible World Cup that FIFA and the world had ever seen.
Outside of covering the World Cup, Marc, what are some of your favorite memories from 2010? Because, it was a time where thousands and millions of South Africans just really found their voice and rejoiced, and was just a happy time. But what are your fondest memories of 2010 World Cup?
Well, there's the traditional angle, of course, and I still ended up keeping every single one of these. And I just remember as a South African, what it meant to have these tickets and to go to these matches. And something else that I kept, I wasn't able to watch a Portugal game during the World Cup, and that certainly saddened me. I wanted to go down to KZN to watch the Portugal-Brazil game that turned into a 0-0 draw, so I'm glad I didn't. But I landed up going to watch a public training session of a Portugal match, and that certainly made me very happy. But ironically, one of the biggest stories that I remember covering didn't even happen on the field. It happened inside of a bank. And I don't know if you recall, but the tickets at one stage were being sold inside banks. And I landed up going to one of the major banks in Sandton. And because of the demand, the entire system shut down. Now, there were so many people waiting inside and outside the bank for tickets that when the system shut down, they had to close the bank down because you would have no idea in what space in the queue you were at. And the tickets remained offline for about 8 hours. And I spent 8 hours inside that bank, not being able to move, not being able to speak to, anyone that was purchasing tickets successfully. And instead, the story of the day became these desperate South Africans locked inside of a bank trying to get their hands on tickets from an offline system. And especially something that we certainly focused on here at Newzroom Afrika with our news, our views. It was just people telling me their frustrations, their arguments, their stories, their complaints, because all they wanted to do was support this World Cup. And here they were, locked inside of a bank with money in their hand, wanting to buy a ticket to the greatest show in the world, and they weren't able to do so. So sometimes it's stories like that that really stand out for me, because it wasn't just about what happened on the pitch, but I also had the opportunity to go to so many different stadiums, and that's maybe something that we don't always get to do as Johannesburg-based reporters sometimes. You know, we're able to go to the Royal Bafokeng, to Old Peter Mokaba Stadium, to watch these nighttime matches, to watch Argentina and Spain and Portugal and Brazil. It was just a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for so many, and that's why 10 years later we still recall it so fondly.
Fantastic stuff, Marc.